Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Robin Budish. I'm the Director of Transit Choices. We are a coalition that is advocating for an equitable, safe, reliable, and efficient multimodal public transit system in Baltimore and beyond. We are delighted that you are joining us this morning for what we believe is going to be a very informative and relevant conversation with our two guest speakers. Before I get started, a couple of housekeeping rules. With the exception of the guest presenter, would everyone make sure that their mute button is on? Even if you are on a mobile device, that's important. It just sort of reduces the noise. And please do your best to be in sort of a quiet, stationary environment. It is my pleasure to first introduce Bill Struever. Bill is the principal and managing partner and CEO with Cross Street Partners. His presentation today is titled Baltimore Penn Station, Transit Improvement Opportunities. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Joe. Go ahead and put up the first slide. So our company, Cross Street Partners, is partners with the BD Development Group in Penn Station Partners. Penn Station Partners has a 98-year ground lease with Amtrak and a master development agreement for the Penn Station and the head house that you're looking at, but also 7 development sites between the 2 tunnels. So I'm going to try to go through this quickly. And this is a work in progress, so feel free to fire away afterwards with your thoughts. I do want to use this as a starting point for trying to energize the dialogue about transit improvements in what I think is this golden moment of time of both for transit, with probably the most transit-friendly administration in Washington in decades, and funding. How long this golden moment will last, I don't know. And I think all we can do is strike while the iron's hot and try to get some good stuff going here. So the basic pitch is looking at Amtrak's investment in Penn Station and the Northeast Corridor is just like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And it's actually happening. And how it is a launch pad for Penn Station and Station North, which historically has been the crossroads of Baltimore. I think it's the one place where black, white, city, suburb, rich, poor, where we all come together at Station North in a very meaningful and spiritual way, and physically. So connectivity is huge, north, south, east, west. The opportunity to have a energized gateway to Baltimore, fighting its negative image around the world, thanks to the wire and now the gun trace task force. We're going to beat that, and my hope is this gateway will go a long way in improvements along Amtrak corridor in Baltimore to changing that image. So a major mixed-use development opportunity that goes directly with it. In particular, I want to talk about what I think are low-hanging fruit for transit improvements. And then ultimately the goal of improving access for community residents to quality jobs. That's what this is all about. So next, we'll go through this quick. So 3 parts to the investment. Joe, you're going to hit the next slide there. Joe.
Can you see the slides? Bill.
You got them all. We just want to go to one. There we go. Okay. So again, we'll try to go quick. 3 parts to the Amtrak investment. One, investing in the station improvements itself. The high-speed rail platform improvements are already underway. That's 50 million plus. The head house improvements underway. That's 50 million plus. And yet to come is the new Landvale passenger concourse on the north side of the tracks, and another 40 million. So 140 million Amtrak investment in Penn Station. Next slide. It's freezing. Second part of the investment is the $2.5 billion purchase of a new fleet of Acela trains. They're already in testing and will be, I think, operational next year. Goal is every 30-minute peak hour Acela service from DC to New York. Imagine that kind of service on the Northeast Corridor. Next slide. And the third piece is Northeast Corridor improvements. One of the big ones is the new Frederick Douglass Tunnel, $4 billion. Other improvements along the way. Talk for a long time about the Northeast Corridor. Talk about maglev, talk about other strategies for Northeast Rail Link. This is all happening. So that's the launch pad. Next slide. So there's, as I mentioned, 7 development sites that Amtrak owns that we're master developer on, a potential of 500 to 1,500,000 square feet of mixed use development. Starting with the Landale parking lot across from the station. Next slide. Connectivity, that's one of the big goals here, north, south, east, west. Next slide. Bringing the neighborhoods back together, one little piece of this, important piece, is trying to connect neighborhoods, not only to Penn Station, but back into downtown. Righting the wrongs of the past with the highway dividing off East Baltimore, Johnson Square master plan. 2 specific ideas around connectivity that we're excited about exploring. One is this notion of a green line bikeway pedestrian way from Penn Station along the Amtrak right away above the tunnel and eventually over to Eager Park and on down to the harbor. And secondly, a more audacious idea of a cap over the Jones Falls Expressway connecting Johnson Square to Mount Vernon between Chase Street on the south and Preston Street on the north. Next slide. Just a couple of weeks ago, with support from Holly Arnold and MTA and MDOT, we submitted a raise grant proposal to USDOT. And again, this notion of connectivity, a whole bunch of stuff looking around Penn Station improvements and how to better connect both, next slide, multimodal and pedestrian and bikes. Next slide. And my favorite thing is to come up with something super duper for bike storage, repair, rentals, sales on that little handicap lot between Penn Station and St. Paul Street. This was an idea that Race Pace had. It involves the technology used in Japan and Europe, where you see the 80-foot long, 12-foot deep, 60-foot high glass storage structure, all mechanized. You bring your bike up right where the elevator is down to the parking garage, and out come these, you have your key fob, out comes this little arm, grabs the bike, takes it up, all lit up, and bikes move around. Would that not be the funnest thing to greet people coming into Baltimore? Next slide. And then in the head house, we're planning a shared office space on the east, beginning on the east hall where the Amtrak ticketing is, and then the upper floors. We want to make this super cool, just full of programming and events, collaborating with key partners around entrepreneurship, particularly minority entrepreneurship, program collaboration, and bringing the broader community together. We want the head house to be this kind of central spot, taking advantage of its gateway location. Next slide. So transit improvements, what Transit Choice is all about, things low-hanging fruit, things we can do quickly. These are ideas from Foster Nichols at WSP. WSP is one of the key members of the Penn Station planning team. And Foster's been around since the days when Schaefer did light rail. And originally there was a 2-track service planned coming from the north into Penn Station and continuing south. A whole bunch of things got cut out back in the early days of building light rail. And we ended up with that totally dysfunctional dogleg dead end service into Penn Station that probably 10 people use. 3 million riders a year expected through Penn Station to sell a mark, and then you got 10 people riding light rail. So the idea here, a bunch of relatively low-hanging fruit, and the key one is number 4. Next slide. Re-inaugurating the second track idea from the original plan, so you can come from the north through Penn Station, continue south. $20 to $30 million guesstimate from WSP. In the world of transit, not that expensive. And would involve, major thinking about scheduling and coordinating scheduling, light rail mark, and really making this light rail a more effective way of getting around. And Peter Angelos talked about at one point some kind of really cool special trolley car on light rail from Penn Station to Camden Yards. Imagine people coming in from all around the state, Northeast Corridor, going to the World Cup or whatever down to Camden Yards. This is the way to do it. Next slide. And then, generally looking at Penn Station as a regional transit hub to connect our disconnected transit system together. Next slide. And a second key idea, low-hanging fruit, not quite as low-hanging as the light rail thing, but Tom Wilcox, when he was chair of Central Maryland Transportation Alliance, talked about a Silver Line MARC shuttle between BWI MARC Station and Middle River MARC Station that would have an improved West Baltimore Station, improved Penn Station, and 2 new stations, one at EBDI and one at Bayview, so that you would have frequent, reliable service, MARC service, connecting the 2 big Baltimore County employment hubs, East and West, and Penn Station as a central employment hub with community residents in East and West Baltimore, increasing access. The improvements that Amtrak's doing to the Northeast Corridor make these kind of MARC regional rail improvements much more feasible. Next slide. And then Holly, in her role at MTA and MDOT, I was just completing kind of initial transit corridor study, looking at a bunch of corridors. This is the north-south corridor, and you can see Penn Station as one key central stop on a variety of alternatives that are going to be looked at. These are probably not low-hanging fruit, probably longer-term transit ideas, but again, the notion of building off Penn Station as a regional transit hub and looking into our transit future. Low-hanging fruit and less low-hanging fruit. Next slide. Northeast Corridor study, and again, I'm sure you'll have Holly on at some point, not just in future, talking about the corridor studies. Next slide. And, to me, the exciting golden moment of time, I've been working away now 48 years since first got to Baltimore. I think Penn Station, Amtrak is already, one of the great coming togethers that we have in our community, as illustrated by this little ceremonial groundbreaking slide a couple months ago. And, a beginning discussion of the funding opportunities, the golden moment in time. We're out for a raise grant. We'll see whether we get it or not. DHCD, Ken Holt's been a big supporter from day one, provided a $750,000 planning grant for public infrastructure connectivity around Penn Station to Central Baltimore Partnership, hoping another $750 is coming. State legislature in FY22 provided $5 million of funding for Penn Station last week of this last session. FY23 provided another $5 million. We got a congressional earmark FY22, thanks to our great congressional delegation pictured in this groundbreaking. And we've applied for another $5 million earmark with our delegation. And then the bipartisan infrastructure bill, now funded in the omnibus budget, has a whole series of transit and connectivity and infrastructure funding opportunities that we want to look at as a potential source. And then last but not least, if Chris Ryer was here, the match for these federal funds is always a challenge, 20% match. Brooke Lehrman was able to engineer at the end of the session an amendment for highway user funds, which Chris says is one of the potential places for the city to find match, that over the next, I think 3 or 4 years, the city will get an increase of $107 million of highway user fund funding that could be used as match. So anyway, last slides. What do you got here? Yeah, so we got the staging up. Hallelujah at Penn Station. One idea, since we are the arts district and we have all these amazing arts resources in Station North, wouldn't it be fun to do something like what the Hirshhorn Museum did in Washington, where they took their staging for their renovation project and draped it with their glorious work of art. Wouldn't it be fun to do something similar at Penn Station? And people say, wow, oh my God, this is really going to be something. Baltimore's on the move. It's cool. It's fun. Last slide. So, Amtrak, amazing, incredible investment in Penn Station, North Dakota improvement. Let's take advantage of it in this gold moment time to really leap forward in all these important ways. So that's my little pitch here. And thank you for bearing with me and fire away. And again, I appreciate, I think Robin's going to circulate this very rough draft, work in progress. Feel free to fire away with thoughts, comments, and say you're crazy about this, or have you thought about that? Eager to hear more.
Thank you, Bill. That was a wonderful presentation. Very informative, certainly relevant, and something that is on people's mind, right? It's a very, very exciting project for Baltimore. I would like to open the floor to questions, comments. You may either raise your hand or use another reaction, in the chat function. Is there anyone? We do have comments and questions in the chat, but let's start with Joseph.
Yes. Bill. Hi.
Joseph.
We've known each other for 48 years.
That's right.
So, Bill, I remember hearing, perhaps not from you, but from somebody, that construction at Penn Station was going to begin last summer. Well, obviously that didn't happen. So can you tell me when we can actually see construction underway?
Well, construction on the platform improvements is underway as we speak, and the first phase of the head house improvements. You see the staging up and the exterior is underway. We hope in the next couple months to launch shell and core. And we would start, if all goes well, on tenant improvements late this year with a goal of having occupancy sometime, in fall of 2023 of the upper floors of the head house. The Lampvale, if Charlie Bond or somebody else on the team would have a better idea of the start date for the new passenger rail concourse on the north side of the tracks, that will be lagging behind. The development on the 7 development parcels is, as fast as we can move it. We're just in early stages of planning right now.
Thank you.
Bill, I'd like to ask a question about transit-oriented development. Can you speak to plans?
Yeah, so there's the 7 sites that we would be redeveloping under our master development agreement and ground lease with Amtrak, which we showed in that one image, mixed use. But beyond that, with the connectivity and the, this is the regional rail hub. Imagine every 30-minute cell service, DC to New York, 22 minutes DC, 45 minutes Wilmington, 55 minutes Philadelphia, hour and 55 minutes, something like that, to New York City. What that means in combination with improvements to the MARC regional rail system for downtown Baltimore in terms of repopulating downtown, both from a residential point of view, arts and culture, but also very importantly from office workers and businesses. We are, half price in Baltimore. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is basically where we're at compared to DC, Philadelphia, and New York. And we have a huge project in downtown Dayton, and they're turning cartwheels about a possible intercity connector, Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, Cleveland, with 3 trains a day each direction by Amtrak. We're going to have 3 trains an hour, peak hour each direction in Baltimore. So transit-oriented development, and we do this connectivity, so you don't have that half-mile hike, essentially from Mount Royal up to Station North on St. Paul and Charles Street. That we're fill that in, energize it. I think and connect over to Johnson Square and into Station North. And, I think just the opportunities for TOD development are just enormous. And there's nothing more important than being able to get around without a car. College Network does their poll every year, 10 years in a row. The number one question college grads are saying, I want to move to a place where I can live without a car. And I think Penn Station's a starting point in Baltimore for that.
Thank you. David? David's on mute. Let's see if we can get him to unmute.
Hey, Bill, congratulations on your ongoing every year, every time transit-oriented ideas. And once again, great. I really like the bike thing you were talking about, the bike.
You're freezing, Dave. Maybe you should turn off your camera.
Okay, I'll turn off the camera.
We got you.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Did you hear? I was just congratulating you on your long-term transit interests and developments, and was asked. I was really enjoying the bike idea with that facility at the station and the east-west connector, or something like that.
Yeah, so on the bike idea, Race Pace, unfortunately, it's Race Pace got rolled up by Trek. A lot of independent bike stores are getting rolled up, and we'll see where that goes. But the guesstimate was $5 million to do that. I would want to make sure the technology works so that when it came down to grab your bike and take it up into that amazing storage thing, it didn't grab the bike rider at the same time and take him up there. But if there ever was a time to get $5 million to do it, I think now's the time. I think we put some money in the raise grant. We have some money in the earmarks. We probably could get some money out of the state funding that's coming. Just do something super cool like that. So it's time to be audacious. I hope we can be audacious.
Yeah, it's a very fun idea. It's very fun, and it's like a landmark thing. It's kind of gives Baltimore a little boost, you know?
I think it would be on the cover of every bike magazine in the world. Anybody coming into Penn Station going through would be able to look up and say, oh my God, this town is cool.
Yep. Hey, well, keep at it, Bill.
Thank you. Klaus?
Yeah, hi, Bill. I can't offer 48 years, but I think 36. So you're still brimming with ideas. That's great. Lots of good stuff in your presentation. I wanted to get back to one point I made very early on when I was participating in the very first presentation that you all did about the redevelopment of Penn Station, which is that a lot of the real estate that you have available on the Landwehr lot along Landwehr Street is not given to transit and intermodality of transit, but is just regular real estate for office, retail, and so forth. And what we have here is, as you pointed out, there are MTA buses, there are circulator buses, there are bulk intercity buses, there's all kinds of stuff. And a real intermodal station would provide integration in the space instead of just having the buses stop at a regular bus stop along the curb as it is today with the northbound buses on Charles Street and the south one on Calvert Street, and then the pickups from Uber and Lyft and the taxis. And there isn't really any real estate given to all of those functions. And I wonder whether this can't be integrated better. Thank you.
Yeah, so if Charlie Bond was here or Gary Fenig, or I mean, I was listening in on a call last week with 38 people on it, all about this connectivity. And I think if you're not part of this, Klaus, really should make sure you see this plan that's in the works and can participate, because I know this has been a priority and it's an important priority from the beginning. But I think you'll be pleased to see that the raise grant and the planning around it is all about just what you're talking about, is creating much better connectivity for the bus, for bikes, for taxi, for Uber. That a big focus on this immediately around the station. Fortunately, we have these very wide streets, St. Paul and Charles Street, so there's a lot of room to do it there. I think we're talking about dedicated lane on Landvale also. So I'll make sure Charlie sends you the latest and greatest on this, and you get an invite, and you can be the 39th person on this great group of people that are working on exactly what you're saying.
Well, thank you, Bill. There's been, before, Jimmy, I'll be with you in one moment. There's also been some comments in the chat. So Bill, I will share that with you and your team at the conclusion of the meeting. Jimmy, did you have a comment?
Yeah. Bill, you throw out a lot of ideas. I'm interested in where one specifically is right now, and that's the light rail coming in from the north and south into Penn Station, and all the trains coming in on a regular basis. Where are we with that? What funding do we need? Do we have it? What's the story?
Yeah, so the True Track thing, the guesstimate is $20 to $30 million, and it's just, I'd like to think it's low-hanging fruit because it's essentially resurrecting the original plan for light rail. The abutments over the highway are already made for 2 tracks. You know, I think there's room to have the 2 tracks, but at this point, it's just Bill being a pest, raising the idea up, and I'm hoping, you know, there's an opportunity in coming months to, you know, take the 2-track idea and really explore it, investigate it. You know, Holly's on the line, and Holly and MTA have been a terrific supporter of the Penn Station improvements, and you know, I think this is really kind of the next step. Question is to, you know, which of these ideas, if any, as they look at, as MTA and MDOT look at these different corridor alternatives, you know, where is the low-hanging fruit, things we can do quickly and affordably, and what are longer-term things. I'd like to think light rail is low-hanging fruit and something that could be done quickly.
Thank you again, Bill. And as I mentioned earlier, we will share Bill's slide deck with each of you at the conclusion of the meeting, as well as the recording of the meeting. But I'll also include his contact information so that if you anything that comes up that you would like to communicate, you will be able to do so. It is my pleasure to now introduce our next guest presenter, Monica L. White. Monica is the Transit Services Administrator, Transit Bureau with Baltimore City Department of Transportation. Her presentation is titled The Charm City Circulator Transit Development Plan. Welcome, Monica. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Robin, to share with your team, with your group about the transit development plan that I've been working on for the Charm City Circulator. I am going to just give some details about what's been happening and where I am with this major project. The Charm City Circulator started in 2010. And this is the first time we've done a deep dive in looking at the routes and where we can make improvements for this service now here in 2021 and 2022. Started working on this transit development plan in August of last year with our goal of refocusing these routes for the needed community, shopping and employment centers, and of course to hear from our community of what changes that they wanted to see made. Some of the goals for this transit development plan included route changes to improve the equity of the service, to create a guide to prioritize these improvements and outline what those service changes would be over the next 5 years, and a form for us to evaluate ridership, to evaluate the service, and where we could make some improvements around specifically transit equity. That was one of the key indicators from the mayor's transition report that he instructed us to take a deep dive in looking at how we could improve. The Charm City Circulator service, I'm sure you guys are maybe aware of this. My apologies if I'm going too far into the weeds here. The Circulator service is 4 routes currently with 24 city-owned buses. Our minimum pullout on a daily basis is 16. We have a couple of buses that are down long-term, just so you know that 24 is not actual 24 that's sitting there. We operate 7 days a week, and that is fare-free. The Harbor Connector service is 3 routes. There are 2 city-owned ferries, and that service operates Monday through Friday. Again, is fare-free. For the study for the transit development plan, we focused on a 2.5-mile radius around the Charm City Circulator service area. And that study area was decided based on our current bus fleet size, the current operating bus budget, the deadhead distance for our service, which is the bus yard is in the Cherry Hill community, and the optimal service distance to be able to affect and to get to those various areas based on that area. For this transit development plan, as I mentioned before, we started back in August of 2021, where we did an evaluation of the existing service, the inventory, ridership. I enacted and put together a transit advisory committee who has acted as a sounding board for me through this process. We did a community survey to ask riders and to ask the community what changes they wanted to see through the service. We went through and did some analysis, and we are now here at the place where we have shared those draft routes with the community on the improvements we'd like to make. We had a public meeting back on April 26th, and our public comment period actually just ended this past Friday on May 13th. And from here, we will move into taking the feedback that we received from the public to incorporate those into our final report that we will be hopefully have published and out to the public by July. I'm going to share some of the input data, some of the information that I came through this information that we put together and as we were doing some of the evaluation. The public input process again included a community survey. This transit advisory meeting, we spoke to various community stakeholders, the housing authority, various community partners. We again hosted public meetings, and we worked very closely with the MTA, directly with their service teams to ensure that we were working hand in hand with them in their service, as well as other city agencies. One of the key questions, and I'm not going to go into all the detail of the feedback from the questions, but one of the key questions that we asked during the survey was, what's the purpose of your trip? Because we wanted to ensure that that purpose of your trip is we were doing our best to try to connect our routes to get to some of those centers that our riders wanted to get to. And many of the people told us, as you see here, is they were connecting to recreation. A huge portion of this is shopping, as well as for their personal and business matters. So for me, that specifically, we wanted to ensure that as we were looking at routes, we were trying to get people where they actually needed to go. And of course, we also asked, what are some of the destinations you want to connect to? Lexington Market was one of the top items that they wanted to connect to, the Cherry Hill Middle Branch area, as well as the Pleasant View area. One of the key pieces, as I mentioned before, I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive here and talk to you about the equity and the various equity matrices that we've looked at as part of this service. One of the key items we looked at here was the percent of households in breakdown of the city of the various communities and some of those community groupings of those areas where there are low car households. So you'll notice specifically, I'll bring your eye to the green route, how with the current route configuration, it does not cross into that 81% area of East Baltimore, where there's a huge concentration of households that don't have, that have low cars, as well as, of course, connecting to the east-west corridors. So for us, and as we were looking at the routes, it was how can we better affect our routes to be able to have this service to connect to those communities where they utilize transit specifically as a direct service for their everyday lives. So the next slide here, the next slide here, and I'll go through, of course, all of the routes and share with you directly, is a slide that specifically shows the proposed improvement routes and how we are looking to change those services to be able to better connect to those low neighborhoods that don't have many cars. So I'm just going to again bring your eye to the green route, where we are looking to connect through this East Baltimore community. That's the Broadway corridor through Hopkins and up to North Avenue to be able to connect to the Rays area, as well as that the North Avenue, which is a major corridor going east-west, as well as the proposal for the new Cherry route, which connects us into this area down in the south part of Baltimore, which is a huge concentration where 54% of the households in the area don't have cars. So I'm just going to flip back real quick so you just see the difference, because I know this was something that people wanted to see. So that's the current routes, and this is the new routes. This slide here just gives a little bit of a snapshot of the current routes, which are the solid lines, and then the dotted lines, which are the proposed routes.
Provided a link.
I'm sorry. So I'll continue. So the proposed routes, which are the dotted lines as it relates to rebuild American infrastructure and that poverty, the persistent poverty areas. So for these new routes, with that, with the proposals, we would be affecting 42% more households that have no cars, 49% more people that are not white, and 47% more neighborhoods that are in and around the poverty areas. For the proposals for the improvements of the circulator, this is just a written outline of what we are looking to do. We are looking to condense and include the Banner route and the Federal Hill section of the Purple route to allow some budget efficiencies to create the Cherry route. We are looking to start the service at 6 a.m. to allow for and work closer to getting first shift workers for hospitals and warehouse. We are, again, I mentioned the expansion and creation of the Cherry route, and as well as expanding the Green route from Hopkins Hospital up through North Avenue. So just going to go through each of the routes briefly and show you just a map of what those are so you can take a look at them. These are just side-by-side maps of, again, the current route on the left and the proposed improvement routes on the right. So for the Purple route currently travels north-south between 33rd Street, Charles Village, Ford Avenue, and the Federal Hill area. Very strong ridership for this service. So what we are proposing for the optimized improved route would be the Purple route would dead end at the visitor center, traveling north up through the current Charles Street, St. Paul Street corridor. And we would expand that service on the north end over Greenmount and 33rd over to connect to the giant grocery store to allow those riders that needed to have a one trip and to combat some of the food deserts specifically in and around this route. The Banner route and Cherry route, I'm going to speak specifically to those. Again, the idea was that the Cherry route would start also near the visitor center. It would travel along and connect to Middle Branch Park, the Cherry Hill Road Light Rail Station, the MedStar Hospital, Port Covington, as well as the Southside Marketplace. This would allow connections to, again, to several points for the MTA service. It would, of course, still and also connect us to the job center, which is upcoming which is Port Covington, the grocery store connections into that Southside Marketplace, and the visitor center to bring us into the central business district. The orange route. The current route is, this is the current route here on your screen, and we just pointed out some points here of where the service would connect to. One of the key pieces, and as we were looking at this route, we wanted to ensure and did our best to try to coincide with the housing authority and the improvements they are making to the PO homes and the redevelopment that's happening in this area. So you'll see here with our proposed improvement route, we would be connecting to PO homes. We would also be connecting to Lexington Market. The route in the middle along the St. Paul Street, I'm sorry, the Pratt Street corridor, there would be no change there. On the east end of this route, we would be connecting down into Harbor Point. This portion would be, we would be picking up this route from the Green route, where the Green route currently travels down into Harbor Point. As we are redirecting that route going north, from the Broadway and the Hopkins Hospital area north to North Avenue, we wanted to ensure that we incorporated that Harbor Point, and actually including the Harbor Point connection on this orange route, which connects along some of the major tourist destinations of the convention center, the aquarium, and the inner harbor, gives a connection to be able to add that as a tourist destination on one route. The Green route. So the Green route currently leaves the City Hall area It connects to, of course, the parking lot that's there on Falls Way, goes down and through the Harbor East area. I mentioned before, it goes down into the Harbor Point area, then goes north to Hopkins. Our proposal would be that we still connect along Falls Way. We also would be connecting to the National Aquarium, as well as the Shot Tower Metro Station, and then traveling along the Orleans Street corridor, which there's currently no MTA service, and going to and near Hopkins Hospital, and then from there going north up to Broadway. Again, there's no service, MTA service, again, along the North Broadway Street corridor. So this would be taking our service into areas not currently served by their services. And this, of course, as mentioned here, serves as part of looking at the redevelopment of the Old Town and the Somerset homes on the east side of the city. One of the challenges specifically, I'll share with you that I've heard from the community over in East Baltimore is they still don't have access to a grocery store from this route. Quite transparently, there's not many grocery stores over in the East Baltimore. That was one of the key things I heard during the feedback and the public comment period. So that's something that we're looking at, is that if there is opportunity to us to, within our current budget constraints, to try to be able to get riders on this route in and near or to a grocery store. Sorry, my computer's doing something weird. So as part of this transit development plan as well, we wanted to think long-term. What possibilities could there be for the circulator when and if we do get some additional funding? Before I go into the slides, I'll share with you the current short-term routes that I did just share with you do currently fit within the current circulator's operating budget. So there would be no additional cost for that. The improvements are, but these long-term 3 to 5 year changes would require some additional funding. So the point of us putting this 3 to 5 year plan in this transit development plan would be for myself and my team to go out and seek the additional funding through these various federal grants mechanisms, the various one-off grants that are out there. So we do receive some formula funding from the FTA, but there are quite a lot of, as we all know, well, there's raise grants, ARPA, and some other funds that are all out there right there for transit. So having this plan in place would allow us the opportunity and to have a plan ready to go to be able to make applications and try to get some additional long-term funding for these long-term route improvements. So some of the long-term route improvements we are suggesting would be creating what we're calling here the PO route, which would be expanding our service from PO homes west over to the West Baltimore MARC station. Again, that route would connect to Lexington Market and City Hall. Again, these are just proposals. There's been no direct details put into stop locations, but these are just based on the feedback that we heard from the community of where we thought that we could have best effect for the service. Again, for the orange route, we are proposing expanding that service over and connecting to the Pigtown area. Again, going through the standard area across the central business district, connecting to the redevelopment of the Perkins homes, and then on the east side, connecting to the shops at Canton Crossing as a business center, as a job center for many, as well as to have that one route shopping for people to those big box stores here within the city. Again, there's no funding. This is our dreams of being able to expand this service. Again, I've heard from the community quite a bit with our public comment period that we need to maybe look a little bit to try to add some additional stops along these routes. So we're going to work on and see if there's some improvements we could have in here for our final plan. I will share also with you right now, the MTA does not offer any direct service from the downtown area over to the shops at Canton Crossing. Most of the services to the shops at Canton Crossing are north-south going through Highlandtown. So this would be also an additional service that they have supported and thought could be an improvement and a great connection for the MTA. So this is just a map of, oops, sorry. Come on, map. This is just a map of what those expanded services would look like with the proposed short-term changes with the Cherry route, that expanded Orange route, and of course, that additional PO route over to the West Baltimore MART station. So where I am, as I mentioned before, we started, and I've gone through the public comment period. We are working on, now that we've received and gone through the public comment period, trying to incorporate the feedback that we've received from the public into the routes to ensure that we are addressing as many of the concerns and that we can, if we can make improvements. We will again be looking to issue the final transit development plan report by July of 2020, with the improvements to these routes going into place by the spring of 2024. One of the key questions I've heard, quite honestly, why does it take so long? Why between the time that you're saying that this report is going to be finished at the end of 22? So we need to, of course, drive and test and come up with in the actual stop locations. We need to build and incorporate new bus stop signs and those new bus stop pads, and of course, construction of those bus stops and things of that sort. So it just takes time for the actual implementation and the actual capital piece for us to be able to start these improvements. There will be some, we will be utilizing some MTA stops, but not all of them. So we want to just, of course, there are areas, as I mentioned before, where there are no MTA stops. So that will require some additional bus stop and bus stop infrastructure that will need to come into play with that. So that is the end of my presentation. If there are direct questions after this, please feel free, the Streets of Baltimore TDP at WRA. They are the consultant team I have been working quite closely with. Please share that. This presentation is available on the streetsofbaltimore.com/TDP if you'd like to download it. We also have our story maps where you can have, there's a direct interactive map where we have and are sharing the circulator routes so that you can actually look at the stop locations of the current routes on our story map, and that's all available there on the streetsofbaltimore.com/TDP through a direct link. So Robin, that is the end of my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Monica. Would we be able to take down the presentation?
Yep.
Please. Thank you. First and foremost, on behalf of Transit Choices, we want to thank you for all of your hard work and your commitment to improve both, accessibility and opportunity with the proposed route changes. Also, we were very honored to serve on the Transit Advisory Committee. So thank you for giving us that opportunity. It was a great experience. It provided, hands-on conversation and just the opportunity to be able to provide input, was invaluable. I'd like to kick off the question period by talking about the Harbor Connector, if I may. At any point, is there going to be a specific plan or study to look at, to look at the routes, to look at proposed expansion, and lastly, really how it can better integrate with the circulator?
So I will share with you, as working through this process, we initially had been including the Harbor Connector and the circulator under one plan. And as we started digging down into the details, started looking at and talking to the various partners and things of that sort, and of course, the conversation with DOT leadership as well as city leadership, we realized that the Harbor Connector needs its own plan, which is why what I am presenting to you today does not have any Harbor Connector information. We have and are still working on a separate process where we will do separate public meetings, the same shared routes, and all of those things, and where the process that I have been working through to share the information publicly with the Harbor Connector to work on sharing and making that connectivity. But quite honestly, they need their own. I didn't want them. And as we were doing this, we realized that we didn't want the Harbor Connector to get lost in the circulator and the feedback that we were getting. So yes, the simple answer, we will be doing a separate process for the Harbor Connector.
Thank you. Klaus?
Yeah, thank you. The circulator was once, when it was introduced, really the pride of Baltimore, and someone called it the entry drug to transit, because there was so much excitement riding the circulator, because it did a lot of things that the MTA buses didn't do. And since then, of course, we are in a completely different place. The excitement about the circulator has completely disappeared. The ridership has disappeared. And the effort of fixing it again is absolutely laudable. But the underlying problem, and your last answer is kind of sort of indicative of this. When the city of Baltimore engages in transit, in addition to what the MTA provides, with the scooters, the bikes, the water connector, and the circulator, then I think it would be better not to have each one run in its own silo and be afraid that the one takes something off the other. Rather, look at this whole menu of mobility options that the city offers, and look at them in an integrated way and how they can augment mobility for the city.
Yeah, no,
Keith, can you take your microphone off?
Finance.
Keith, can you please turn your thing off? So anyway, the circulator suffered and started suffering when it started to lose money and needed money out of the general budget instead of general funds, instead of being funded as originally intended from the parking surcharge. And it was, like many circulators in other cities, a downtown solution. It was to connect people that work downtown with parking, so that we wouldn't have so much parking directly in the center of downtown, and find better uses there instead, and allow people that work to go to lunch and do some shopping and all of that. And then it started to migrate into these extensions going all the way to Hopkins up, and then going over with this very tortured green route that had practically no riders, and extending it all the way to Locust Point. So that was way outside downtown. And then that's when we started bleeding money. And now you're continuing this same approach with trying to go into neighborhoods. And while equity is a very laudable goal, of course, you are trying to fix things that the MTA service is not providing, or is actually also responding to. So the lack of service in Cherry Hill, or the insufficient service in Cherry Hill, is being addressed in the latest MTA route revisions in the fall, or in this year. And so I don't understand why we are trying to duplicate what MTA does, and how you think that can make the service better. In your rider inquiries, the biggest thing that people wanted was more reliability and more frequency. And now you're expanding your miles of service with the same fleet and the same budget. That's never going to work. So you will even have less reliability and frequency. So I'm not sure that you are not getting lost in your own original mission.
So just a couple of things in your comments. The goal of the circulator is definitely for us to have an incorporated service for the Harbor Connector and the Charm City Circulator. My comment specifically about it's having its own plan was specifically so that we could focus on the needs of that service, because they are very specific as it relates to piers, docks, quite honest, dock masters, some of these other things that are outside of the bus service. So, and as we are talking about those things with various with players and the group that focuses on those items in and around the harbor, it's a different audience. So from my side, being the transit administrator, I fully understand and agree with you. There should be and will be integration with those services. We just, as my team, want to be able to have a clear plan for that service without it getting bogged down in the detail of the Charm City Circulator service. So I fully understand what you're saying there. The operational challenges for the circulator have been, trust me, they are the bane of my existence. And as I spend way too much time on a daily basis dealing with operational challenges. And those for me are being addressed as I work directly with the operator of the service as well as part of the contract and as part of that process. So making the improvements for the operations of the service will directly affect the improvement of the reliability, as well as the on-time performance for me, which are directly affect the people and the ridership. So making the changes to the routes, and as you mentioned, we did expand into some areas. That for me is based on the feedback that we've gotten from our leadership. Is that we want to be inclusive of the circulator service to be able to connect to the communities that need this service the most around the city. So the expansion of it was based on the feedback that we got from the mayor's office, and again, his transition report of where we needed to do our best to improve the focus of the circulator, so that it, in addition to connecting the tourist areas, we wanted to be able to have the service utilized by some of the communities that needed it the most. So these are, I agree with you, there are multiple challenges for the circulator, and these challenges are not going to go away overnight. But I am doing my best to be able to tackle all of them, and they are just, unfortunately, they need to be tackled bit by bit and in different places. So the operational challenges, again, for the performance, tackling that with the actual provider. The actual route improvements, again, that's being tackled here in the transit development plan. Thank you for your feedback.
We have time for one more question. David?
Well, I guess I want to reiterate the whole importance of prioritizing the short headways and the reliability, because I've almost missed trains at Penn Station just trying to get up Charles Street on that route. And this is pre-COVID. So that reliability and shorter headways, it was such a great thing where you started out, as Klaus pointed out about the circulator. So that's really important, and really important also the harbor connector. Our harbor is such an asset still, and really connecting up all the assets along the waterfront and hopefully neighborhoods that connect through everything else in the transit system. So I really hope that you could prioritize the headways and the reliability. But thank you for your hard work. It was nice to see.
Thank you. Charles Street is a bear. Let's just be honest. It continues to grow in the amount of travel and traffic that's going up and down Charles Street. So that is probably one of the, and I'll just share with you really quickly, one of the key routes, the purple route, is our strongest ridership. And that is, I get it from both sides, quite honestly, people saying, it's the same route that's traveled by the MTA routes. Why don't you move that service and move it somewhere else? Where I'll share with you all, because the MTA service is so well traveled, our route service is honestly just as strong as we share ridership data along that Charles Street corridor. So if we take that route away, we would in essence bog down the MTA service and put more cars on the road. So it would be even more difficult to get from that downtown area up to the up to Penn Station. So it's just a challenge, quite honestly, in that area. Thank you.
Monica, there are several comments in the chat. I will be happy to share those
Please
with
do.
you
Thank you.
at the conclusion of the meeting. Jimmy, do you have any closing remarks before we end the meeting?
I just want to thank Monica for all her hard work and for appearing on our presentation as one of our presenters. And Bill, if he's still there, thank him also. And thank all you all for joining us, who do join us, because that's what makes these presentations possible and valuable to the community, is to have your participation. So that's it.
With that said, we want to wish each of you a wonderful day. Stay tuned for upcoming details regarding our next Transit Choices meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.